¿podemos ir acercando, por favor, para comenzar? Buenos días. Good morning to everyone. It's my great pleasure for me to introduce our first speaker, who is going to talk to us about dual education system. He is from Germany, Mr. Gernot. Rump? I don't know that. Rump. Okay, thank you. This is a subject in which we should be all deeply interested, because dual education functions like cooperation between small and medium and big companies that here in the area of Laya we have a lot. That companies certify that students receive the abilities needed for work, regardless of region or company. Employees in all parts of the world trust in these certifications, since these provide evidence of the individual's knowledge. In addition, our speaker has spent his last years in consulting people, companies, and universities on dual education system. As I said, he grew up in Germany, where he attended when he was a student in this system. Mr. Gernot studied business administration, doing dual education and Deutsche Bank in Germany, and other international banks in the credit and securities business area. After completing his master's degree, he worked as portfolio manager in one of the larger mutual fund companies in Germany, and later in financial institutions in China and Ireland. So he has a big international experience. He later collaborated for a decade as senior investment management in IBM's German pension fund. He is now a university lecturer and expert advisor on dual education issues and a doctoral candidate in human resources, which his research focuses on the selection and evaluation of personnel in effect of dual education. So let me please say that it's an honor for us to have this morning Mr. Rump, and his speech is going to be about promoting economic growth and competitiveness through dual education. Please welcome Mr. Gernot and give him an applause.
Gracias, y muchas gracias por su invitación. So I will change over to English language and I will allow me to take cover so you can understand me better. Here on my right hand side we have a little presentation that goes around what I'm going to talk about. I hope you can read it. If not, it will be, I guess, made available online on the website of the conference. Maybe just a short word about Celaya. I guess everyone knows here the water hour, ¿no? La bola de agua que la lleva, yo pienso más que 100 años, ¿no? So this is an installation, and I was surprised to find it out on Wikipedia, of German origin. So there are some German roots here in Celaya, and I'm following those. So I feel very honored to be with you today here on the stage. Secondly, I would like to quickly comment, yes, my focus as a banker has always been managing money, investing. So basically, my mindset is on opportunities and trying to benefit from those opportunities by investing in them. And when I married my wife about 50 years ago, I changed more of my focus, more of my attention to Mexico. And back then I remember the oil production, Pemex, and the oil field Capita. That was the main factor of earning money, generating the government or state budget. However, this situation has changed drastically. You all know that in 2014, the government decided to initiate changes in the energy sector. So basically, as an investor, this caught my attention. We are now in a new era where energy production or oil and natural gas production plays a less and less important role. I guess Mexico might even become or already is a net importer of energy. So basically I was thinking, well, where are the opportunities in Mexico then, if it's not Pemex and the oil anymore? And I came to the conclusion, it's very obvious, it's all of us, it's the people that are the recourse, the national resource of this country. So what do you need in order to develop a resource? Now in oil we have all those complicated technology and installations in order to extract the oil from where it is. And I think working with people, it is education that is needed in order for people to develop skills, to gain knowledge. So basically, I decided to change from my monetary investment focus and doing a PhD in another field, which I find very interesting and challenging, which is human resources. Because here is the biggest resource. Mexico's most important resource is people, and those people, they require a good education. So basically, why education? Because you want to promote economic growth and competitiveness. You know that the world is global. Internet is connecting markets and minds. So there is an exchange of thoughts, ideas, initiatives globally. This is also why we speak English, I guess, because English gives us access to a lot of countries in which maybe English is not the native language, but a lot of people hopefully had enough education in order to be able to communicate in that additional language. And I think in the context of science, also in my doing my research, English is very, very helpful because it gives me access to a lot of literature which is not available in other languages. So, dual education. What is dual education? Dual education is a special mode of education that originated in Europe and is very, very popular in Germany. So there's two elements about this education, and I think a quick way to explain to you the topic. We have two places where people are taught and learn, where they practice. Not only the classic place, the universities and schools, but also where they are gonna work in the future once they are ready. So the enterprise or companies, they are becoming also another place where I can gain experience, where I can practice my skill, where I'm being taught. So basically this mode of education is different from what we call traditional education, which is, for example, university only, and then maybe afterwards some practice in a company, an internship, which is usually much shorter than within a dual education program, where you have at least, I would say, 25 to 50% of your time you spend working or learning to work. So basically, developing human resources is a complex process, and the Austrian economist and famous management consultant Peter Drucker, he shares my alma mater. He's from the Goethe Universität in Frankfurt. He once said, the ultimate resource in economic development is people. It is people, not capital or raw materials, that develop an economy. And I very much agree with him on this point. Of course, we need capital, we need financing, this is very important. That was my job for many decades. And we need raw materials in order to produce, in order to have our tools, to have infrastructure. However, if we only had raw materials and capital but no people, who would work with all of this? Who would have the idea what to do with this? I guess the oil would still be beneath the ocean in the Canada field, because no one would have expected it. There would be no cars driving around, no industry producing, no people thinking about what they want to do in life, developing ideas, commercializing those ideas. So please remember those words. Human resources are to be taken literally. We humans are a resource, and that resource needs to be developed. So here I have another quote by an ex-Prime Minister of Australia, and she was saying, our future relies on competitiveness and innovation, skills and productivity, and these in turn rely on the education of our people. Again, in order to be competitive, in order to be productive, we require education. You can see it in my example. I'm a German and I'm now talking to you in English, and I will change back to Spanish, which all of those I had to learn. And I had to learn from zero. And I must say, in my case, I started to learn pretty late. For example, the Spanish, I already was around 23 years old when I started. And learning is not the easiest of the parts when you are getting older. But nevertheless, I managed, hopefully, to speak a decent Spanish and a good English. So basically, education is very important. Imagine if I wasn't able to speak Spanish, how would my life be here in Mexico? It would be very limited. So today I would like to talk to you about the case of Germany, because that's where dual education has one of its own or focus points. I would like to talk to you in a more scientific context about labor market equilibria, because this theory is not only theory, it applies in practice. And we as scientists, we use theories in order to make what is very complex more easy to understand, in order to create knowledge. Then I will talk to you about dual education in that context. As I said, education is an important element for the labor market. And of course, I will talk about Mexico. That's where we are. And as I said to you, this is where the future lies. The median age, as I checked on Google, for Mexico is around 20 years old, which means 50% of the people are younger than 28 years, which basically means they are maybe still in education, or they are going towards receiving an education. So basically here in Mexico, there's a lot of work waiting for all of us. Whether we are parents, teachers, scientists, and even politicians, we have to take care of that resource. And then after this, I will be available for your questions, and I will do my best to give you answers, which maybe there are some questions which I may not answer, which are subject to further research. So let's go to the case of Germany, where I come from. Right here, I just put it in easy to understand, intuitive language pictures. As you can see here, that's an old photo of Volkswagen Käfer, or Vocho como se llama aquí. And it's the 1 millionth car produced, and they went on to produce many more. And as you can see here, there is a lot of people surrounding the car because the car didn't produce itself. It is those people who produced, initially designed, invented the car. And maybe an important point, they not only work with their hands, they also work with their brain. And you have to have an idea what to do with all the metal in order to turn it into something useful as a car. And please take a look at the smaller picture that we have here below. This is something you did not experience here in Mexico, the Second World War. And remember, that's the second, I'm not talking about the first. Left a lot of destruction in its wake. So basically, Germany, which started the war, ended up being destructed. And not only people killed, but also in industry, infrastructure being destructed. You know, war is nothing productive. It is completely about destruction. And as you can see, this is not a color picture, so not too many years later, this is what the Germans made out of that terrible and challenging situation. Since we are scientists, I rather talk about information. And here we have some GDP numbers, which you can see in the form of those lines. We have the United States, United Kingdom, Japan, Germany, China, and India. And in order to orient yourself, which is very simple, this year is the era of the Second World War. And as you can maybe see, Germany had a noticeable dip. Remember, this is not a logarithmic scale, which it maybe should be. So the dip looks relatively small, but in those years, that was a major dip. I mean, remember all that destruction. That was thorough destruction, almost complete destruction. So Germany somehow managed to recover from this destruction, as well as Japan did, and the United Kingdom, and the US. And funny enough, as you see here, the degree, the angle at which the GDP was rising is almost the same. So a country that hasn't seen that destruction had almost the same economic growth, but as they say in English, with a head start, because they did not have that dip. On the contrary, the United States was benefiting because they provided, for example, agricultural goods, food, and other things to its allies, like the United Kingdom. which suffered industrial destruction. So in essence, it was, I don't like to say that, but a good business. So as you can see, somehow Germany managed to recover from its great mistakes and all that destruction. So I think we should all ask ourselves, how did the Germans do that? What was a major part that enabled us to recover from such a big and negative impact? And first of all, let me mention, it was of course the Marshall Plan. So the United States of America initiated a financing plan that was handed out to various European countries that were impacted and left destructed after the Second World War. And I didn't bring you the graphics, but if you do your research, you will find out that, of course, Germany, in relation to comparison with other countries, received less of the Marshall Plan, but yes, we also received financial aid. So let's move on. Exports. I guess when you think about the German economy, what you realize is Germany is all about exports. Why? Because we are only 80 million people, many less than here, and lots less than the United States. However, concerning absolute GDP and also relative GDP numbers per capita, we are on the top of the charts or near the top. So basically, Germany must be very productive. And how can we sell so much? I mean, one thing is to ask yourself, how can we produce so much? The second thing is, where can you sell all of this? And the answer is, you have to sell it outside of your country. And it's not a have, because I guess maybe some of you will be driving what I would call a German car, which you all know they are also being produced here and in other countries. But yes, it's originally a German brand. So exports is a big part of our business because other countries realize that those ideas that come from German engineers and the products that come from, among others, German workers, qualified, skilled labor, is of good quality. Because as you also know, that for example, German cars are not wanted because they are cheap. On the opposite, they are quite expensive. I, for example, do not drive a German car. I decided to go for a car that's cheaper. So anyhow, there will always be a part of the market everywhere in the world where people can afford and where they ask for a good, high quality product. For example, car enthusiasts who would like to have a car that's a little bit quicker or a car that's a bit more safe in its construction and features than the average or even the cheap car. So export means to create markets where maybe there is no markets. So about 50% of German exports are classified as quality goods. This is also empirical research, and you will find the quotation right below. There has been a group of scientists that they said, okay, we know about quantity, but we are also interested in quality. We want to know a little bit more about Germany's composition of exports. And today there is a system of HS digits, which is an internationally agreed standard how to describe certain products. Because we need to know what product it is in order to apply taxes at the customs. So they serve themselves this HS systems, which has 6 digits given to every product that goes or leaves the country, entering other countries. And this way they were able to decide whether those are high quality, medium, or even low quality products. And they came to the conclusion that around half of exports are of above average quality products. So again, quality is key. And this not only applies to the United States, Germany, but also to Japan, and even China, France, UK, Italy, Canada, Australia. So I think we should not only think in pure numbers and quantities, we should also think about quality. You know, our space is three-dimensional, but even if you know all three dimensions, you may not be aware that we have a fourth, which is time, because you can't see it. Well, there is discussions among physicists whether there is time or not, but let's assume there is something like time as a dimension. So here we have two dimensions, not only quantity, but also quality. So returning to the GDP, we should not only study percentage points in dollar values, we should also look at the composition, the quality of those numbers, because that contains additional value information. So let's talk now about labor market equilibrium. How does it work? Famous manager, Jack Welch, he once said, if you do not have a competitive advantage, do not compete. And I very much agree with him. The economy is about competition. That's part of the game. We also have competition among universities, which is the better university, and maybe even which is the better, say, candidate for a doctorate, the better student, which is the better citizen. So competitiveness is normal, but if I am not competitive, how can I compete? So let's take a look. Here's another fact. I will read it for you because I guess the covers are not so easy to read. Skill differentials between countries have also been shown to be a major factor in explaining differences in productivity in advanced economies over the period since the Second World War. So again, remember my GDP graphic where we had kind of a lower growth and then suddenly after World War II a much higher growth. This is also been characterized by skill differentials between countries. And let me go back. I guess we all agree that back in those years, the skill level of the average Chinese or Indian worker must have been much lower than of the average European or North American worker. So yes, as you can see, skill differentials can open a wide gap. So it's not only about how many hands do we have, it's also about where is our brain, how much can it contribute to the overall economy. Let's start first with what in literature by Feingold and Soskis in 1988 has been called a low-skill equilibrium. And also that there is a labor market. So we compete for jobs. Every one of us, at the end of the day, if we're not born as millionaires or rich people, we need to go to work. And many of us, even if we have the money, we like to go to work. Remember Maslow and his pyramid of needs. We like to realize ourselves. We have ideas, we have energy, we have passions, we are interested in certain things, and we have a lot of time. So basically, people compete for jobs. And I would say employers, companies compete for good employees, good workers. There's also a competition. Because if you as a company are not competitive, you end up with people who may not be as interested, productive, or well educated working for you. So yes, again, competition. So where we have competition, there's movement. And where there's movement, usually in nature, there tends to be a mechanism that results in some kind of an equilibrium, in where most of the people have a job and most of the companies have the workers they require, because otherwise we don't have an economy. So let's look at the low skill equilibrium. This is, and it's difficult to read here in blue letters, competition based on price. So who's cheaper? Whether it's a product or a service. Which product or service is cheaper? So basically there is intense competition which is based on low price. And where does the low price come from? In great part because of low labor costs. Usually technology has its price. The machine costs what it costs. However, there's more, as you call it in English, wiggle room or room to negotiate wages. So basically, companies end up trying to push down wages. And this results in a self-reinforcing dynamic, which does anything but favor skills. Because who would spend too much time learning if they don't pay you much? You have to work every day. 2 jobs, 3 jobs, Saturdays, maybe Sundays, in order to earn what you need to earn to live, to pay for your family, to maybe have a little bit of some savings. So low skill equilibrium means I'm not being paid well, and of course I don't have much of a good education, because no one will pay me for it. The Germans would not sell their cars in exports if the other countries wouldn't, or customers outside of Germany would pay them the money that they are asking for, because it would result in a loss. So low skill equilibrium is kind of a vicious circle. And remember one thing, remember cost of production or marginal cost of production. What will happen in that kind of competition? It favors naturally monopolies, duopolies, or oligopolies, because there is the effect called economies of scale. So the bigger your production, the less cost per unit you have. So basically, I can outgrow and outcompete competition, not by quality, but by sheer size and low production cost. And this is why, for example, China has risen to the top GDP-wise, because they have a lot of scale. So I would like to give an example, first hint towards Mexico, maquiladora. This type of industry is about low cost. That's why there is maquiladora. It's not because the quality, it's more about low cost labor. So let's keep that in mind. The other equilibrium is a high skill equilibrium. That's competition based on quality, not only price. I would even say it's almost purely about quality. So here, you require highly skilled workers, people with ideas, people that can generate added value. And this results automatically in an education-driven economic strategy. Because when we are born as babies, there's not much we know. And maybe our parents can teach us only so much. We need school, we need university in order to have a good education. And the companies, they hire skilled workers because they aim for differentiation. They want to set their cars apart. A BMW is a car, like a Nissan. A Volkswagen is a car. A Mercedes is a car. A General Motors or Buick, they're all cars. They all have 4 wheels and a steering wheel. Yeah, but they are different. They have different designs, different functionalities, different features, different only possible with a high skill labor equilibrium. So basically, when you have a good education and high skilled workers, the companies have to pay higher wages, but they are also more productive. They innovate. They can increase their sales even beyond their home market. That's why you may or may not process German goods, or you may be even benefiting. For example, WhatsApp is very popular in Mexico. Is that Mexican? No, it's an export from the United States, Silicon Valley. So basically, what I would like you to be aware of, high skill equilibrium leads to something that is helping to grow the market and not to monopolies. So totally the opposite. So let's talk about dual education, because I think that's an important part to understand about the German Wirtschaftswunder or economic success story. Alfred Mercier, he once said, "What we learn with pleasure, we never forget." Yeah, he was a philosopher, but that's true. And I can see it also in my students at the University of China. We are a traditional education institute or university. There is no practice where I teach. However, I try to bring as much practice or practical real life context into my lectures as I can, because I see that students, they say, the theory is boring and maybe it doesn't even make sense. So why do you teach me all that stuff? That's boring and it costs me a big effort to memorize everything because I'm not interested in it. I don't even know what it's good for. Well, I try to tell my students, hopefully with a good success, that at least some of this is very well important. And once they realize this, they learn with pleasure. And I find to have a certain number of students that it seems like they almost enjoy to learn, which means they are giving an effort, but they don't see it as an effort. It comes naturally. Dual education for me is exactly that kind of mode which for me personally gave me that pleasure to learn, because I was being paid, because people took me serious. I had to deliver results, I had to do good work, I had to be reliable. But at the same time, everyone knew I was new to the job and I was still learning. It's like learning to drive, you do mistakes, but people teach you. And people are respectful because they know you are young. You cannot know everything. So you will always find people willing to share their knowledge, educating you. And this is the basic concept of the dual education in Germany. In Germany, the concept of a profession, a Beruf, is something that not only includes knowledge, listen, but also practical skills, können. And then what it results in is something even more complex. It results in a professional identity. That's why I said in the beginning, I am a banker. And this is what I feel like. Yes, what can I say? I like to make jokes. I am now in human resources, but there's still a banker. I'm always thinking about numbers. And I try to square off the accounts. This is a natural tendency because I am a banker, which means dual education forms people. It gives them a professional identity. It's just like sports. When you're good at soccer, you feel like you are a soccer player, and that's what you're proud of. I'm not so good at soccer, but I guess I'm decent at banking. So yes, I am a banker. I'm not an engineer. And that's the interesting thing. I like to get to know other people from other professions, and then I'm beginning to learn that yes, an engineer has a lot of things in common with me because they also do calculations. They also try to be exact, but in a different context. An engineer is not a banker, and a banker is not a plumber, and it's not a sales guy. So there's different professions. and people in Germany identify with their profession. So again, high quality education is important, and it requires companies to invest time and resources, because education in the beginning is not so productive. But it is important because well-educated people will be more productive once they finish their education. So let's go here, final part, the case for Mexico. So how about here? Matthias Sen, an economist of English or Indian origin, he said economic growth without investment in human development is unsustainable. So basically, every country has to see that there's good education, because otherwise economic growth will not happen. There's one important fact that I was able to find. Some scientists did the empirical research, and they came up with the following conclusion. In the period of 1995 to 2011, Mexico has lost around 530,000 jobs to or with China as a result of its net trade, and particularly in sectors such as electronics. So basically, every one of you has a mobile. Is that of Mexican production? No. Is that of Chinese production? Very likely. So according to those statistics, and they are on the news, as you can see, 500 million jobs were not created here, but in China. So maybe there is a lack of competition or competitiveness. Another GDP growth per capita. So let's look at the individual productiveness of the worker. The green line here, the top line is China. The line on the bottom is Mexico, and this is, I think, from 1996 to 2018. Well, not much action in Mexico, yes. There is growth, but at a much lower level than, for example, in China. So as you can see, jobs are not being created here, they are being created elsewhere. And part of the reason is, if you look at the research and development spending as a percentage of GDP, again, China is considerably higher than Mexico. So my message is, Mexico should spend more on research and development, because then Mexicans will come up with good ideas, good products and services. And there's more than 100 million Mexicans, 125 million. So I'm sure there's a lot of ideas that just need to be discovered and developed. So again, in the words of an old economist, Herbert Spencer, the great aim of education is not knowledge, but action. And that's true. Yes, we have to study, we have to be patient, we have to put in the effort, we have to memorize, we have to understand. But the objective in the end is to become productive. Because otherwise, science will remain an art with no application. But I think, yes, every innovation in some form is based on research, science, and knowledge. So this is my concluding remark, and I'm open for questions and answers.
Thank you very much. I'm sure all this knowledge will complement our education. If you have any questions, please let me know. Please.
Thank you. I'd like to know if you can tell us, or if you identify, what is the difference between the graphic of China and Mexico? Because if you look at the line in Mexico is flat, it's a flat, and it's like 20. But in China, it's wrong. But what is the difference? Because maybe, China was not identified as a good country with growth in many years, and now it's different. What would be the difference between that and what you consider that should be the exit? Thanks for that.
Thank you. Economies are very complex. There's many things at work, and I just know two aspects. I think research and development is something that Mexico should not only finance, but also put into production. So I think in China, the research is being done, and the educated people, they find financing. And the government is very much supporting the economy in whatever is needed. Because the government has one main aim, a growing economy. I'm not sure whether growing the economy is one of the top priorities of the Mexican government. And I'm not sure whether research and its application is one of the top priorities in Mexico. I'm sure it is in China.
Thank you. Another question?
Hello, I am Francisco, and I was thinking that maybe we need some kind of profile for merging these people that is in academy making discoveries and people that is in the industry. I think we have nice industry in Mexico. You said also maquilas and everything like that. And we have also Mexican industries born in Mexico, very nice industry. And I think we have a nice academy in Mexico also. But I think we need the bridge. Which kind of profile people do you think, or maybe the question would be, in Germany, do you have some kind of office or specific people to bring this together, or maybe academy people has this profile, some kind of industrial people, or maybe industrial people has also some kind of feeling of the academy and they can join easily. Because in Mexico, we cannot do that already.
Yes, and I think you already provided part of the answer. In Germany, we have what is called Handelskammern. Entonces, en español son asociaciones empresariales, pero no solo son empresariales. So, the Handelskammern are basically an institution where companies, universities and the school system, and of course the government are working together. And they are forming the professions in Germany. We have more than 700 officially registered professional profiles in Germany. From a painter over a banker to engineers, whatever. And this needs the cooperation, the close cooperation between companies, because that's where the money is, the government, that's where the laws are being made, and in the end, the universities and schools, because that's where people receive their education. So yes, it's a closer collaboration that is needed. And in order to have this, you have to have organisms or forums where those can work together. And this is actually my big project where I'm trying to help, along with other colleagues, the Alianza Empresarial para la Educación Dual en el Centro Bajío Occidente. We are trying to establish this.
Thank you very much. Another question? No? Okay, I think we are on time. Okay, so thank you very much for your conference. Here we have a small I don't know the name in English. But
Thank you. Gracias.
The Tecnológico acknowledge you for your participation. Thank you very much. I hope this is not the first time we see you here, and we hope to be close friends in all the graduate system of the Tecnológico. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Gracias.